All right, what's going on, guys? I thought I'd do a quick little rundown slash walkthrough slash get to see show and tell how we went around mixing Shirley Tempo's new song "Nothing to Be Heard." And to do so, I'm gonna call up my screen here. All right, let's go to this tab. All right, so a quick little walkthrough, at least on how I have my session set up. I use Ableton primarily for my tracking DAW, and I am using Windows as my OS. My whole tracking system is routed through an RME RAID in my PC in the room next door, actually. Um, and that's piped in over two ADAT cables that run into I have a Matu A28X, I think, and that's at 48 kilohertz. When I go around tracking drums, I run two ADAT cables downstairs and into a M Audio Profire 2626. It's kind of a cheap interface, and I was able to find on Reverb for relatively a low amount of money. And this one's kind of special though because it's been modified by this one's kind of special though because it's been modified by Black Lion Audio. So the preamps on this are closer to, I guess, what it would be like if Black Lion made the interface, because it's got improved sound, I guess, would be the simplest way to do that, word that. For miking on drums, I use a Ludwig kit with a port in the front on the kick drum. For mics, for overheads, I use a set of Dizengoffs, one LD 118 over the tom side, and then an LD 1948 over on the snare side. I've since changed this because I was fortunate enough to get a second TLM 102, and in this setup, at least for how I was recording it at this time, the TLM 102 is on the front of the kit, like just above the kick drum, and kind of pointed towards the toms, the rack toms. For the kick drum, I use an NS10 speaker actually right in front of it. You can kind of see it on this photo. It's right there. Just to give it that sub kick, sort of big woomph sort of sound. On floor tom, I use a D2, a GA-D2. And then on snare, I use a KMS 104 from Neumann. Simultaneously too, when I'm tracking, at least when I'm getting a rough track of the mix, I route a Ethernet cable downstairs and do XLR over Ethernet, and then that's piped into my Autier, my Black Lion Autier quad. Yeah, it's piped into my Black Lion Autier quad upstairs, and then that's running into my Matu A28. So when the whole band is over and performing, that's all routed then into my desktop into Ableton. And then if I'm downstairs, I just remote desktop into my computer, and then I can control different levels on the mix as need be. And then sometimes I get a good workout running up and down the stairs, because sometimes I might need to adjust a level on a guitar. Usually, in most cases, I tend to not run amps in real time, just so I have the drums isolated from the guitars. And I also like to be able to focus more on, if I'm going to reamp the guitars, being able to pick and choose the amps that I want to use. And for the most part, when I'm tracking, sims suffice. So that's at least some of the workflow that goes into how I track. And at least in this case, for this song, that was the approach we took. Let's get into the actual session file, so we get to actually kind of hear what happened and where. So I'm gonna solo just the drums first. You can kind of hear at least some of the thought process that went into it. Toms, I'm not too picky on. Toms, I tend to be pretty cheap on my mic choices. I just use a Samson C1 and for the rack toms, and I use a Joe Meek JM27, which, I mean, the Joe Meek's kind of broken, if I'm being honest. The mic doesn't really behave the way it should, but sometimes it sounds really nice, especially when paired in a mix. It's not so much like I wouldn't use it on its own, but because I gate the drum so much, like at least the toms, all I'm really after with those mics is that transient where it's like actually hitting it and not so much the full room. So for the most part, when the toms aren't being played, you're not really hearing like those mics in work. Mostly you're hearing the overheads and the kick and the snare, so, and the front. So that's kind of, at least when I prioritize mic choice, that's how I go about doing that. Let me play some of this. So I did some interesting things in Ableton actually to these drums. So one of the anomalies, at least on this mix, was I actually used a PSP's Springbox in this one because I wanted it to sound a little more surfy and have kind of that snapback that sort of Springs can emulate. But I also then later sent the whole drum bus to my I later then sent the whole drum bus to my Doepfer A199 spring reverb tank, and then just did it twice with different settings on each side, and then panned that out, and that sounds like this. So let me just solo that. Not that exciting, but when you layer it in with the other drum tracks, it just fills. It just fills the whole mix up and gives it more of a stereo presence. The front mic I do something kind of sneaky with, or not sneaky, but sort of at least how I tend to mix stuff. I've discovered, at least if you take a mono track in Ableton and use the utility tool, flip the phase on. It's basically taking a mono track and turning it into a stereo track, and then flipping the phase on one side of the track. So it just kind of forces it all out to side. It mixes really well into the mix, into the drum mix. So it gives it at least more spatial sort of sound. So I'll solo that and so you kind of hear what I'm talking about. So that's with if I didn't flip the phase on the front. With it flipped. You kind of hear how it kind of gives like the drums more placement within the room. It's at least one of the tricks I've kind of utilize on some of my tracks. Okay, so now let's move on to bass. We'll start with bass. Okay, so bass guitar, Raymond tracked this. I don't remember what guitar he used because he changed out bass guitars like 5 times on this record, because every time he came over it was, hey, I got a new bass. But basses ran through a DI, and it's just going through IK Multimedia's Amplitude, and it's just going into a Bassman 300. Nothing too fancy about it. Same Bassman Bass 810 Pro cab, and then I don't think I did any actual post EQ on it either. It's pretty clean, at least in Amplitude. After that, we go into Basslane. Basslane is fantastic. So this is like almost like a stereo widener for bass, but it doesn't really ruin like phase relationships in the same sort of way. It's a very controlled tool. I mean, it can, but like for the most part, it's a very controlled, very neat tool for making bass sound wide. So I'll solo that on and off with this one. So this is just without Basslane. And then with. It's subtle, but when you're stacking everything up at the end, it kind of adds up. And then let's go to guitars. We'll do rhythm guitar first. So rhythm guitar is a So this is one guitar. So in this case, we're using the Vibroverb Sim from IK as well. And then we have a second layer from Dave, which is this. And then that track is we then reamped that. So we took that, shot it out of Ableton, and then to their amp, and to Shirley's amp. So let me grab that photo of that day. Yeah, so that was just KMS on the grill, and then the Neumann TLM 102 in the room. So it's picking up. Excuse my scuffed room, but that's sort of, we got what we got on that. Yeah, so kind of just went with that, just added it in. The thing, oh, I didn't pan that. Oh, I panned one of them. Okay, so that sounds like this. And this is just Dave's guitar because we didn't reamp Alex's. Just kind of gives a little bit more drive, and at least something's analog on the track, you know? And okay, oh, synths. We'll do synths next. So synths, we just use Serum. And what all did we do in Serum? I don't think I did too much in Serum. So it's just this is kind of sine wavy thing with a sub oscillator. Nothing too crazy. Then we're running it through Pancake just so it kind of moves around a little bit and gives it a little bit more space. Yeah, the synth on this song wasn't too complicated. Yeah, and then let me see, did I add reverb on my sends? Yeah. So on my send tracks, I have reverb from Valhalla on send A, send B. Just Ableton stock delay. Ableton stock delay is not bad, guys. You guys are sleeping on it if you don't know. And then gold plate from Kush Audio. This is a fantastic, if not the best, plate reverb. At least I've encountered. It's got a nice tone. It's got a really nice tone on guitars and vocals, all that stuff. I send it like just a little bit, at least on like these vocals, like the synth. I sent it to a lot of tracks. Dave's guitar, Alex's guitar. They're all getting sent to gold plate, just so it gives it that just a little bit of width and a little bit of personality, and a little bit of tone and color. It's probably my go-to reverb, especially on rock music. It just has a really nice tone for it. All right. Vocals. Let's go to the vocal tracks. So vocals were tracked in this room, actually using this microphone. So the vocals were done with a TLM 102. And then, at least on my vocal chain, I tend to be... He wanted a more distorted vocal. And so for that, I routed it through, at least on plugins, using Antares' mic mod. That one, there's no TLM 102 model, so I modeled it to the closest thing, which was the TLM 103. And then I'm having it as... I chose those as the source mics, and then the model mic, I'm using an AKG C414 modded one, so it's some version of the 414 that Antares had that was able to get a IR of that was modded. I'm not sure entirely how the specifics on what that mod did, but it sounds pretty fantastic, if I'm being honest. Vocal preamp, I use a Warm Audio TB12 Tone Beast, and I believe it's set towards I think we did it through the steel settings on this one for the transformer, just to give it some grit, and that's some extra saturation. So that's first on the chain. So we go first into mic mod, and then after that we go into Omni panel. Then Omni panel, I'm kind of a simpleton with, at least when it comes to vocals, because I just honestly, for the most part, I use a preset to start off. I mean, I tweak it obviously, but like just the preset vocal 3 is fantastic as a starting point to build off of, just for like compression and EQ settings. And I tweaked the EQ a little bit, and then did a little bit with the de-esser, and then just messed with it a little bit. After that, it goes into Bliss, also from Kush Audio. Kush Audio stuff is pretty fantastic if you're after definitely more quote-unquote buttery sounds. They just have a nice taste in their modeling and plugin design. Hitting the saturation pretty hard on this one. Threshold -8, no makeup, because we're going to hit it harder later. Not doing a whole lot with the EQ. No, I'm not doing anything with the EQ. Then after that... Oh, wow. I didn't remember doing this. I guess I ran it through Ozone Vintage Tape. Actually, after that, probably because I was after more distortion sounding, because the vocals are pretty heavily distorted. And then following that, I go into Soothe, mostly just targeting the S's, so this is just a de-esser setting. And then last on the chain is the Tube Tech. Now, I boost really high on the high frequencies. I cut quite a bit on the low, but that's probably just like rumble and stuff. Little mid dip, and a little bit of makeup gain at the end, just to glue it all together within the mix. The vocals are actually multiple channels because we did multiple takes on this. The vocals are kind of a fun experiment because I'll solo just first the vocals that are the primary vocal.
Sunday afternoon, midnight speaks, but nothing's ever heard. All I want is something in return. So sit down, sit down, sit down.
It's kind of radio-y and just cuts like right through the top of the mix, which is why I went so heavy with the saturation and also the lift up in the upper frequencies. But in this case, we also ran the vocals through the Doepfer A199.
I'll stay out on a Sunday afternoon. Midnight speaks, but nothing's ever heard. All I want is something in return.
So that's running at the same time the main vocal is, and then I threw a reverb on that channel specifically for more of a hall sound. And then all glued together, it sounds like so.
Sunday afternoon, midnight speaks, but nothing's ever heard. All I want is something in return. So sit down, sit down, sit down.
So it's just kind of got a little bit of more of that vintage sound, but also like, yeah, it's kind of, at least that's how we did the vocals on this one. That's not how I do it every time, but some variation of that. And then one of the coolest parts of the song is actually the vocal harmonies, right? Like if you guys are familiar with the song, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I'll play it together with the main vocal and solo.
Sunday afternoon, midnight speaks, but nothing's ever heard. All I want is something in return. So sit down, sit down, sit down.
So the harmonies were all Alex. We did multiple takes of him just layering on those upper vocals. So in this case, we did 4 of them. 2 of them are panned at 20 left, 20 right, and this is on Ableton's pan laws, which are up to 50 each, right? So 20 left, 20 right, and then another take that's at 50 right, 50 left. So they're panned pretty far out, and then there's some that are closer, and then they're just layered on top of each other. At the end of it, though, this is where I kind of found kind of a neat little tool. So there's this tool called Endless Smile, right? And it's kind of a simple plugin, but it does some kind of cool stuff where it's like where it has like kind of like a it's a combination of like reverbs, I want to say barber pole kind of style, like flangers, and so it lifts up infinitely in some ways. At least in this case, we used it in the face melting joy setting. This is more of like an EDM build plugin, right? Like you're probably familiar with like the classic EDM style build into a drop. It kind of does that effect, but at least on this case, we used it on the harmonies because it just sits. You'll see. So it's almost like got a delay, reverb, and flange going all simultaneously. It's kind of a simple plugin, at least as far as interface, because it's just set to like whatever setting you set it to, because it's a one knob plugin. But it's kind of a fun little thing sometimes. And then at the end, there's this one little sound that comes in, and this is me just overdriving the spring reverb for feedback. And then that's layered with a second synth. And that just has reverb, delay, and a couple other little things on it. It has delay, it has the Kramer reverb, at least on the feedback part, into a room reverb. And then that one is Serum into Gold Plate into Endless Smile again. So it just kind of all goes out into space. It's that noise you hear. I'll play it in full context so you guys hear what I'm talking about. And then the guitars come back in right after that point. So I wanted to give it kind of a little bit of a lift before things come back. But yeah, that's it. I hope you all liked it. I'm gonna run through the track one time in completion. Lost my mind, just someone in disguise. Walk through walls, a girl, a freak at night. Nothing's wrong, but nothing's ever right. I made a call with no one on the line. Lost my mind, just someone in disguise. Walk